Using AI just to speed up things is like running a high-speed car without having brakes. We are moving from the mindset that we had to prove that the system is working to the mindset wherein we have to constantly prove that the system can be trusted as a whole, right? The question has changed to, is it still working as intended, as you were expecting it to work over a period of time, with different data sets across different permutation combination of scenarios and at scale?
Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of TestMu AI XP webinar series. Through this series, we of course dive into a world of insights and innovation featuring renowned leaders. I'm your host Kavya, Director of Product Marketing at TestMu AI, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you all with us today. So today's session promises to be a fascinating deep dive into one of those industries which is very rapidly evolving, especially in the age of AI. I mean, with how artificial intelligence is, of course, reshaping insurance testing, it's redefining trust and compliance, and also pushing global quality engineering teams to rethink the very way in which they have to think of quality at scale. So, let me introduce you to our guest on the show today, a leader whose career truly reflects what it means to drive meaningful, large scale transformation. Joining us is Lisha Rakesh, Senior Director Financial Services at Capgemini, who brings with her over 20 plus years of global IT consulting experience. Lisha also currently leads the North America insurance testing portfolio for the financial services segment at Capgemini, with end-to-end accountability for strategy, delivery, excellence, innovation, and growth. Beyond her deep expertise in AI driven testing and intelligent test automation, she is also passionate champion for diversity and inclusion and CSR initiatives. She also, has been one of the leaders who has been at the forefront of this evolution that has happened over the technology evolution that has happened in the insurance sector over these many years. So I think the very best person to have a conversation and get more insights on this particular topic, which is impact of AI on insurance testing. Lisha, we are absolutely thrilled to have you with us today. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
joining.
Kavya.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, what are we going to discuss today? In today's session, we are going to talk about how is, of course, AI rapidly transforming insurance through smarter underwriting, faster claim decisions, and proactive fraud detection, and what this means for the future of testing in the insurance space. Together, we will also explore the shift from deterministic validation to continuous assurance, the growing focus on model risk and explainability, which is a very important topic. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of you might want to hear about her views, and how to validate generative AI outputs embedded in core insurance operations, as well as what are the skills testing professionals must build to stay relevant in this AI driven era. So, of course, that's quite a lot of topics that we are going to cover today. So I don't want to wait further. Let's get into the discussion. But before that, right, Lisha, would be great if you can speak a bit about your experience, your journey, what you have built over these many years, perhaps.
Thank you so much, Kavya. I think you explained a lot about my journey. I've been in testing throughout my career, which is, I feel a lot of pride in that because I have grown from a tester who got introduced to automation to a testing leader who's now delivering really real time transformation programs. I've seen a lot of evolution of testing with automation coming in, and then we were looking at regression testing being cut down from 2 months to 2 days kind of a time, and now actually going to 2 hours to 2 minutes kind of cycles, right? So that's the evolution that I have seen in my career journey, and I'm very happy to be a part of this session today and talking a little bit about my experiences and the journey that I've taken.
Thank you so much, Lisha. I really appreciate it. So, jumping onto the very first question, right?
Mhm.
How is testing for the insurance sector changing with AI? So you have seen it right at the forefront of it. How do you think it has evolved?
I think it's a great question to get started with, Kavya, keeping in mind the topic that we are talking about. And honestly, as I was saying, in the last 20 years, testing in the insurance space has gone through a pretty significant evolution. And especially now in today's world, because of AI coming into picture, there is so much of change that is happening. If I had to simplify this whole thing, I'd say that we have moved from a very traditional thought process, a very rule based testing, to a much more intelligent, a much more insight driven testing frameworks. Earlier, if you see how insurance testing was done, it was a very structured theme. You would be validating the policy systems, there are claim processing, there is billing. All of it was based on predefined scenarios. There was a lot of heavy manual effort that went into it. It worked, right? It had to work, but it was so time consuming, and sometimes we all struggled to keep it with the flow, or how fast the business is changing today. Now, with AI, what has happened is that there is a big change in how things are perceived and how things are expected to work in introduction. First of all, if you look at the whole test design aspect, right, that itself is getting smarter. Instead of us writing hundreds or thousands of test cases manually, which used to happen back in the days, AI can actually look at the production data, it can look at the user behaviors, it can capture customer sentiment, look at the risk patterns, all of those things that are coming in from the production environment, real time environment itself, and then suggest what should be tested, right? So the focus is moving towards testing everything to testing what matters most, like the high risk claim scenario or complex underwriting rules, those kind of things. Secondly, I think one thing that has been a problem for testing in insurance always is becoming even more central, which is data. Insurance runs on data, whether it is the customer data or the risk models or even external data sets like telematics. Now, one of the biggest challenges that we have always faced as testing community is getting a very good test data set without violating the privacy aspect, right? And AI is actually helping us by generating synthetic data, which is so similar to what the real time data is, which is actually a huge win. And at the same point of time, while the testers work on those scenarios, they're also validating the AI models themselves. So they are actually checking for biases in how underwriting can be done or how the claims decision making is done in the real time scenarios, which is a completely and a fairly new dimension of testing, I would say. Thirdly, which is again a very important factor, is that we are seeing a shift towards continuous testing. There is faster testing that is required, with cloud, there is API, microservices, all of that coming in. The expectation is that the insurers should be releasing updates much more frequently. Now, what AI helps us in doing that is by optimizing the regression testing. As I said, it used to take 2 months, 3 months earlier, and now it has been slashed down to a very short regression cycles. AI helps us in predicting where the defects are likely to be and then reducing or optimizing the overall testing effort. So teams move much faster without compromising on the quality. At the end of the day, insurance business runs on trust. And as AI is taking on a very big role in the decision making within the insurance sector, this trust needs to be validated continuously, is what I feel. And that is where testing becomes a very important, a very critical, player in the whole scenario. I don't think it's a gatekeeper which comes at the end. It's more of a strategic enabler that is embedded throughout the software development life cycle.
Thank you so much, Lisha. Great points. I actually made a summary of it, as you mentioned, right? And it is super helpful for everyone to take away these notes right at the start of the session itself. Like the first point was, of course, the focus is changing on what should be tested rather than testing everything. And I think that also makes quite a lot of sense in today's age when there is so much of code that's been generated. There's so much of, applications that's been released, features that's been released. I think definitely becomes very critical. The second aspect is, of course, generating the synthetic test data and using it. I really also appreciate that you called out about how testing has changed in order to basically optimize regression testing at scale. Again, something that I am pretty sure that every insurance business might be facing, because I think with all the agentic tools in the out there, the code development, of course, has increased much at a faster pace, of course. So I'm pretty sure that testing has to basically now keep up with development rate.
Absolutely.
And yeah, the last aspect of it, which is basically testing being a strategic enabler and not being a gatekeeper itself. I think that's great point. And this also brings me to the second question that we have for you, which is from deterministic validation to continuous assurance, right? What does that shift really mean to you in practice? Because I'm pretty sure that you would be seeing a lot of clients, working towards those direction on a day-to-day basis. So, what are your insights on it?
Yeah. I think it's a very interesting question, Kavya, right? We are moving from a deterministic world to a non-deterministic world, wherein a lot of things happen on probability, prediction based models. I think and it can be a very loaded question in my opinion. I think the easiest way to understand this shift is that for testing, we are moving from the mindset that we had to prove that the system is working to the mindset wherein we have to constantly prove that the system can be trusted as a whole, right? How do you decipher that, right? Like for example, in a deterministic world, testing was pretty much about control. It was a lot about certainty, right? You define the conditions, you will validate those outcomes, and then you sign it off, right? As a test manager, I would say, okay, this is good to go. It's very, very structured. And once it is done, you move forward with a lot of confidence because your test manager or your release manager has given you a sign off. In today's environment, especially with AI coming in insurance, the bigger question isn't did it work, right? It's not about the functionality, is it working as expected? The question has changed to, is it still working as intended, as you were expecting it to work over a period of time? With different data sets across different permutation combination of scenarios and at scale, so all of these different parameters or elements come into picture. So in practice, if you look at continuous assurance or looking at non-deterministic systems, there are a few important changes that come into the whole testing methodology. First of all, validation becomes very much contextual, right? So instead of testing for isolated scenarios or focusing a lot on the functional testing, you actually start looking at the holistic system. You look at how the systems will behave across end to end business journeys. You will see how the claims will flow, how the decisions are being influenced, and whether the outcomes will stay aligned and consistent with the business intent, right? That's the first change. Secondly, you also see that there is a very systematic shift towards outcome validation over the rules validation. For example, right, you're now less focused on whether a specific rule got fired correctly, but you're more focused on whether the overall decision for the claim processing, was it fair, was it consistent, and was it aligned with the policies and the regulations of the industry, right? So you start looking more whether the rules are working, more from whether the rules are working right to actually whether the outcome is coming right or not. And the third one, which I also talked about in the last response, was more about the feedback loop, right? So the feedback is becoming a very core testing input. Earlier, you would do the testing based on what you had agreed at the start of the program. Now, what happens is that the continuous feedback that is coming from the production environment, the customer sentiment that you're gathering, all of that, the real world usage, the exceptions that you have encountered, all of that starts feeding back into how you're refining your test strategy. So testing becomes more adaptive, right? It's more dynamic and very, very less static. Also, the teams have started thinking a lot in terms of resilience. They have started thinking how the systems are behaving under change. What are the edge scenarios, not just focusing on the positive scenarios. They're looking at what are the unexpected inputs that can come in, rather than just do a check mark or a tick mark that the system is correct under the predefined scenario. So ultimately, if you summarize this shift is about moving from a mindset that quality is no longer something that you confirm at the end of the cycle and then move on from. It's something that you are continuously sensing, you are measuring it, and then strengthening it, product over product, release over release, is what I feel.
Thank you so much, Lisha. I think that's some great insights. In fact, that also makes me wonder if you have any probably tips for quality engineering leaders who are probably facing the challenge of keeping up with that adaption, right? I mean, if they have like a lot of non-predictive, non-deterministic, when they're working on a lot of non-deterministic models, for instance, right? Very prediction-based models. How essentially do you have any strategic steps or framework that you have created for yourself, perhaps that you can perhaps share, or even a couple of tips on how they should get started, or what is the mindset that they should have in place for it?
Yeah, I think you need to be very flexible, right? There is a lot of collaboration that needs to happen. So testing cannot be siloed anymore. You need to have people who are working together with the business. They understand the domain. They understand how the development teams are thinking about the product. So if the testing community needs to be completely embedded into the whole model of testing of software delivery, right? So that is very important. And test managers, like I'm saying, that earlier it was very structured. You had a test plan, you would not change that test plan till you go forward with the release, right? Right now, that's no longer the case. You have a test plan. That test plan needs to probably change just as soon as you enter your testing cycle. So the test managers or test leaders need to start thinking a lot in terms of how they can build in flexibility and how they can quickly recover. That's why the resilience becomes very, very important. And it's extremely important for you to understand, like I'm saying, the business and what is happening in the real world, so that you can deduce your inferences from there and then bake it back into your testing methodology or the approach that you're using. Because if you're not able to do that, you will go ahead with the traditional static testing and you will be able to qualify the system, but it is probably not in the right spirit. It's also important for people to understand what are the models, right? What is the data set that is being used for decision making? Because, like I said, it's no longer that you confirm something and you move on from it. It needs to be there. You have to, continuously work towards it, continuously review your team. You have to continuously review your approach and everything, and then change your approach based on the feedback that you're getting. So I think there's a lot of adaptability that has to come into the way we are doing testing these days.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, the reason why I asked was when you were speaking about it, right? I did feel that if, I mean, of course, I work in marketing, but if, say, it was, a quality engineering leader or like an engineering leader who's listening to it and they're working in insurance, I think one of the core things that they might be wondering is, does that shake up the foundation for us? But I think what I could sense from, or what I learned from your answers was that the foundation more or less remains the same. It's how you sort of approach it, the strategies that you take it to change it. Thanks
Yes,
so much.
that's right.
So, moving to the next question, right? Explainability is definitely becoming a regulatory expectation. How do you test for it in a systematic, repeatable way?
Again, a very, very critical topic, Kavya. It's very important because within financial services, both insurance as well as banking are heavily regulated industries, right? So every decision that you're making, every test release that you are signing off, you really need to stand up to the scrutiny later on for that, right? So again, at a simple level, testing for explainability is about making sure that you can consistently answer the basic question, why this decision was made, right? Or why did you say that this was passed, or this is right or not, right? And this needs to be very easy for to explain, so that it is making sense to the actual business users or your auditors, or the regulatory authorities. So when you look at this whole explainability, what the teams are doing in practice is first understanding and getting a clarity on what explainable means for their context. Again, the context comes into picture. For example, if it is underwriting or claims, it's just not enough to produce a decision that, okay, your claim is processed or your claim is rejected, right? For example, you actually need to clarify, and you need to show which were the factors that influence that decision making, and whether this is aligned with how your business is thinking, what are your business rules, and what is the industry regulation and expectation for that, right? So you have to be very, very clear in terms of how you can explain it back to the end customer, because you can be questioned by them, right? And once you have been able to establish that context, once you have been able to make sure that it is operating in terms of your ecosystem's expectations, from there, the next step on the journey is to make this process repeatable, right? So instead of relying on one-off reviews, what the teams are doing is they are putting in structured checks to make sure that the explanations are very stable and they are pretty consistent. So if you have similar inputs, you should see similar reasoning. Okay. And in case the output is differing or it is changing, there needs to be a very clear and logical justification to that, right? So that everything can come together. So the key is that your decision and the explanation for those decisions need to be married. They need to come together. It's not just about whether the output is right. Maybe the output that you have produced is right, but the consideration that has been made for getting to that output is not, right? So you have to make sure that the reasoning behind it is understandable. It holds ground when you're looking at it from a business perspective, because ultimately, these are the explanations that need to be consumed by all the regulators, your end customer, and most of the times these are non-technical stakeholders, so it needs to be reasonably simple in terms of how you can explain it. uh, Again, insurance companies or insurers need to be audit ready at all points of time, right? Which means that there needs to be a full blown end to end traceability. There needs to be logs. There need to be decision trails, right? All of these explanations need to be documented so that at any given point of time you can go back and clearly demonstrate how a decision was made or what was the journey that the decision making took. And I think each one of us who's working in the testing side are should hold ourselves accountable for that, because every document that I sign or every document that a test manager signs qualifying that the release was done, there's always a financial impact to it. There's a brand reputation attached to it. So it needs to be we need to be extremely careful that we understand the nitty gritties of how the system is functioning and what are the parameters that are impacting our decisions, and then be able to clearly explain it. I think that's why explainability is a very key factor in driving how we do the testing these days.
I was not able to unmute it. Thank you so
Okay.
much for really explaining it really well, Lisha. Because I was before we started with the call, right? I mean, I also wanted to understand deeper about what does explainability mean in general, especially from a regulatory aspect, right? Because that's not a term that I am used to, for instance. So thank you so much for throwing light on it. What I, as part of when I was searching more about it, what I found was that a lot of times teams and organizations could have easily said that, um, you know, we came up with this answer because this was the answer that we got, right? Or it perhaps misses out on all the edge case scenarios, and it isn't able to handle those scenarios. I think I also spoke briefly about, before we started the call, I also briefly spoke about how there are so many AI agents coming up, even within the financial sector perspective. And there is this question, of course, on whether they can handle the edge cases as well as a human can, perhaps, right? So, are there any other scenarios wherein you have seen that companies probably did not get it right, or probably got it right? Either of the situations. Is there a example perhaps that you could share um, with the audience?
See, Kavya, I feel that, at least the client base that we cater to, right?
Yeah,
They are all, pretty mature in terms of their AI journey, right? That's what
agree.
I have seen, right?
Yeah,
And when you look at AI, of course, insurance is, I would say they are sometimes a little bit more, careful. I would
yeah,
say they're more careful in terms of bringing it, because like I was saying, it's a highly regulated industry.
yeah,
One small error on your side can really impact your brand reputation, right? That's why we also, when we are looking at testing for these organizations, we are very, very careful in terms of what we are qualifying
hmm,
as a
hmm,
release, right? So
right,
there is a lot of accountability that comes in play for insurers, right? So I have seen in the past, right, like talking about one, I can't even believe when I say past, it's just like a year
yeah,
ago kind of a thing, 8 months year ago.
absolutely, yeah,
I saw that insurance companies are very careful when they are looking at embedding AI into it.
hmm,
Now, all my customers are talking about AI. They are
yeah,
bringing in AI into their full decision making. There are a lot of companies wherein you do a straight through claims processing. There is absolutely no intervention of a human decision maker there,
wow,
because a lot of your claims would fall into a category where you can just quickly look at it and then do it through, right? Or policy or customer onboarding, all of these areas, I do see a lot of our clients adhering to AI based decision making,
yeah,
and taking it through, right? It makes our work very difficult because you have to make sure that the models are working. Like
yeah,
I was saying, explainability is very, very important, because any one fine day anybody can come and start auditing your system. So you have to make sure that while this whole straight through processing is happening, all the decisions are being made in
yeah,
the right fashion. There is no bias that has creeped in, or your models have not drifted in terms of how they should be behaving. So those things come in. But I definitely have seen a lot of mature AI implementation in the work that we are doing right now in the industry. That's how I see that. And there is a
thank you so
lot of
much.
focus, sorry, just to add on, there's a
Mhm.
lot of focus also on the whole leadership that has come in. The
Got it.
leaders
Yeah,
are very technology focused, so they
yeah,
understand domain, they're looking at the technology, they're marrying both, and then
yeah,
we are looking at those kind of thoughts.
yeah. Also, I suppose the regulatory framework aspect as well, right? Entirely, like,
Absolutely.
for instance, the EU AI Act, for instance, right? I mean,
Yeah.
definitely something that all the organizations have to adhere with. Same goes for, I think, GDPR also plays a definite role in this. And I'm pretty sure that there
Okay.
might be several other regulatory aspects even within the insurance industries. So I think,
Yep.
even for organizations that are probably at a less mature stage when it comes to their AI journey, I think the point that Lisha is making is that you can't no longer rely on black box models, perhaps, and rather think of it from a wider breadth, at scale. Great. Thank you so
Yep.
much for sharing that. Now, moving on to the next question, right? How do you help insurance clients balance the urgency of AI deployment with the rigor quality demands? Yeah, must
Right.
be a tough question.
No, that's the easiest, because that's where we earn our bread and butter, right? This
Yeah.
is actually where things get real for most of the insurers, because
Hmm.
see, there is a lot of pressure to move fast with AI.
Yeah.
But at the same point of time, for insurance, the tolerance for quality issues or production incidents is extremely low.
Yep.
As we were saying, there is so much of attachment and mapping to your brand and
Yep.
financial outcomes, regulatory penalties, right? All of that comes into picture. So
Yep.
there is a lot of pressure because all of your competitors are doing the same. There are a lot of fintechs that are coming in, and they are going ahead and being able to promise that I can go ahead and do your product release in a sprint's time, right, or two sprints.
Yep.
We will go ahead forward with the plan. Earlier, when you looked at each of the product deployments or new product introduction, there would be 3, 4 maximum products annually that you would release. Now people are talking about every month a new product into the system, right? So that's the pace at which the insurance companies are moving, and there is a lot of pressure actually in the industry to get this sped up even further. The way we approach this problem or challenge is by helping our clients to balance the speed with the structured approach rather than just treating quality as a trade-off, right? Because you just can't do that in insurance. One of the key mindset shift that I'm seeing is that people are moving away from a big bang deployment to a more phased controlled rollouts, right? So we are not trying to perfect everything upfront. Organizations start with very well defined use cases. Like, for example, they will look at claims triage or they will look at customer servicing, right? Where the risk is very well understood that in case this goes wrong, what is that I'm looking forward to. This, when you look at these kind of controlled use cases, it allows them to move fairly quickly, right? But it is very controlled. You are fully there, you understand what you are going forward to, right? At the same point of time, what we are doing is we are embedding the quality checks early in the life cycle and not just at the end, I was saying earlier. So things like model validation, which is again very important for your explainability, data quality checks, business rule alignment. It all happens as the solution is being built. Right, so nobody is going and saying at the end of the cycle that, oh, the data that you were using was not good, right, or you needed better quality data. You don't do that. You are doing that right upfront, and this is avoiding the situation wherein finding out something at the end wherein you might have sped through the whole of the delivery or development, but in the testing you are doing so much of free work that end of the day you are not being able to get any optimization of your testing cycle time, right? The other thing that we are also doing is, like we said, that we are not doing big bang, we are doing controlled experimentation. Another one is around the risk based prioritization. Not every AI use case carries the same level of impact for the insurers. For example, when you are talking, you have a problem, right, and you need some clarification. You're talking to a chatbot, okay? You might be more tolerant or you might be more flexible if that chatbot gives you a wrong response or there is an error or it crashes. You might be more tolerant on that than a pricing or an underwriting model or even claims processing, right? So when you look at that, you can easily classify the different functionalities within the insurance life cycle or insurance end-to-end journey based on risks. So what we do is we help the clients to apply the right level of scrutiny or the rigor, as you mentioned, based on the business risk, the regulatory risk that comes into picture, and then they focus mostly on the deepest validation where it matters most and not testing everything. There is a lot of focus that we are also seeing around automation, the right tooling, the accelerators, right? Whether it is reusable testing scripts, testing frameworks, synthetic data generation, model validation tools, all of these, right? These are all helping the teams to scale the quality without slowing down the delivery, because that's what the ask today is. And in many ways, quality is becoming very, very critical in this context. And I love using this phrase because if you don't use the right testing and the assurance, using AI just to speed up things is like running a high speed car without having brakes. That's how I call it, because you'll run faster, but in case something goes wrong, you will not be able to stop from a big crash. So that's how people should start thinking and not think that they can get rid of quality at all.
Thank you so much, Lisha. I think this is a great, answer for the question. And, I also was thinking about a conversation that I had yesterday. This was with one of the, largest payment gateways. It
Mhm.
was concerning that. So the Stripe, for instance, it's a public case study, by the way, but they do have like autonomous AI agents called minions, which are apparently producing near about 1,300 pull requests per week. So and that's across the company, for instance. And I was wondering, right, how are these AI agents being tested at the end of the day? For instance, of course, like from a TestMu AI point of view, right? I mean, we have like our agent testing platform, but even otherwise, it when you think about such organizations, be it in financial services, technology, or insurance, for instance, right? I think having that framework very early on should also be really important in order to scale the deployment along with keeping the quality aspect of it in mind. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love the term minions, right? Probably I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you're right. Testing these agents is very important because,
Mhm.
when we started experimenting with the agentic systems, Kavya, the test creation agent for a very simple requirement will give me 2000 test cases. Now,
Right.
nobody will be running those 2000 test cases because how the agents will think is everything needs to be tested. But
Right.
then you need to make sure that you're putting in the right kind of thought process, some intelligence in terms of what they give. Because if you
Yeah.
sit down as a tester, you're not going to do 2000 or 200 test cases for a small requirement. You'll probably run just two. So I think that's where the intelligence and the domain knowledge comes into play.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. No, I think that is also something, it has been one of the foundation, um, I would say, thought process when
Mhm.
we came up with our agent testing platform as well. Because be it chat, voice, phone, right, or image, for instance, there are so many different types of agents coming out in the market, and everyone's building an agent these days, right? So you need
Absolutely.
something, a framework, a tool, in order to make sure that it's the best possible agent that's been built in that particular space, and it's not, causing a havoc or breaking down when in production. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Um, I think we have, of course, discussed quite a bit about the strategy aspect, the different frameworks, tools that you could do, what are the best practices and all. But I think one of the questions that a lot of our audience would definitely want to hear more about would be, what skills does a testing professional need, right, to build to in order to stay relevant in an AI-driven insurance world? So would you want to perhaps also, share from your personal experience, perhaps?
Absolutely. And this is a question that I get asked most of the times,
Sure.
not just by my clients, but
Yeah.
also my own testers, my internal team. They ask the
Wow.
same thing. Is testing becoming irrelevant? What do we need to do to to stay relevant in the industry? So I would say, Kavya, that the role of a tester is definitely evolving, right? It's earlier we used to have a functional tester. We used to have, a person who will understand the domain. There was one automation tester, there was one performance tester. So we used to have so many different types of tester in the same program. Now it is less about picking up one skill. It is more about building a broader, a more hybrid skill set. So if you look at the core level, I think the biggest change that needs to happen is that the testers need to be more data aware. Okay, they need to understand how the data is flowing, how the models are trained, where the risks can creep in from, right? I don't say that you need to be a data scientist, but you need to be at least comfortable in questioning the data and the outcomes, because that is the end goal that we are looking at in insurance. And you can only question when you understand the basics. So for each and every tester, I think it is absolutely important. There's one single skill that you should be learning is getting comfortable with your data set. Of course, I think technology is a more level playing field now with AI, because churning out code, churning out test cases is more. I think it's more convenient and easier now. But there is a very big growing need for business and domain depth, especially again in insurance, because in insurance you have so many different kinds of insurance and everything has its own nuance. With AI, you, like I said, you don't just test the functionality, you're validating the decisions. So understanding how underwriting works, understanding the claims behavior, the regulatory expectations that we talked about so much, this becomes absolutely critical. And on top of that, if you have to learn a third skill, it's more about automation, AI enabled testing. Learning about the different tools, the different frameworks that are in the market is increasingly important, right? And also understand how do you scale that in a very smart way. So if you look at it, it's more like a pie-shaped tester that we are looking at, or forward deployed engineers that we call now, wherein you need to have the basics in terms of testing. You need to have very clear understanding and deep domain understanding, and then at the same point of time you need to have the skills of automation, AI, all of those kind of things to be able to use the technology that you have at hand in the right spirit. One of the key things that is equally important are the softer skills or the human skills, right? The teams are changing. The structure of how the teams are right now is very different from what it used to be earlier. So there is definitely a strong collaboration needed. You need to be able to articulate things well. Your communication should be really, really good, right? Your ability to work together with multiple stakeholders, manage multiple things, change, your thought process and approach based on the feedback that you're getting. All of these become extremely important and critical human skills that a tester must look at improving.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisha. I'm pretty sure that these are some great tips and takeaways for our audience today. It also brings me to the last question of the day, which is what will the insurance quality engineering operating model look like in 5 years? Is that too long? Because I mean, while we wrote the question, of course, for you, but I'm just wondering because in
Yeah,
the
I
last
think
couple of
5 years, I don't even know if I'm going to be replaced by a bot or somebody else is going to come and talk about it. But I definitely
I
see
hope
that
not.
there is a there is a big change that is happening, Kavya.
Yeah.
If you look at how the things are headed,
Yeah.
we have seen organization oscillating across different operating model, hybrid, centralized, federated, all of that. I think the insurance quality engineering model, or if I have to say in general, the quality engineering model will increasingly become embedded, wherein quality is, like I've been saying, it's no longer sitting outside or siloed as a downstream activity. It is fully integrated into cross-functional teams, wherein the testers, the developers, engineers, data scientists, BAs, everybody comes together and they are owning the outcomes end to end. That's what I'm seeing, at least in the client segment that I operate in. So instead, of validating after the fact, everybody has done their things, and then testing team comes into the picture. My testing teams are now continuously building, and they're assuring that quality is a part of the overall delivery flow. That is how the mature teams are working. Secondly, I think governance is becoming extremely important and intrinsic to the way the systems are built and tested. Uh, I cannot, specify it more, but insurance is heavily regulated, right? So capabilities like explainability, end-to-end traceability, compliance, these are not separate checkpoints. They all need to be baked into the pipelines. The tooling, the decision-making framework, everything has to be embedded and integrated very properly, so that you're making sure, like I said, that not just that the outcome is correct, but also it is auditable, defensible if you come to that point. Uh, One of the very important things that we are seeing is the evolution towards the bionic model, wherein the human testers and the AI agents are working together, right? Which, in my opinion, is actually the biggest or the most fundamental shift in how testing works today. It's not human led with AI support, I would say, at this point of time, it's actually a true partnership between humans and the AI agents. If you look at 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in a traditional human centric model, people would do most of the thinking and the execution. The testers would design the test cases, they would prioritize, execute, analyze, all of that. And there were tools that were just extension of the human intent, I would say. This is a powerful model, but it's also limited by the human speed, the scale, the cognitive bandwidth, all of those factors. The bionic model has changed that completely. Now you've got two actors, the humans that bring in the context, they bring in the intuition, they bring in judgment, domain expertise, right? All of those things come in from the human testers, and the AI brings in the scale, the speed, pattern recognition, continuous learning, which is very difficult for human testers. So I feel that both of them are complementing each other, they're supporting each other, and they're working together as a system, with each of them doing what they're best at, right? So clearly, these are the changes that I'm seeing in the whole operating model that is coming up, or that's working at least in the industry right now. One is having testing embedded as part of your overall teams, putting in a very, very robust governance, to make sure that your models are not drifting, and you have the right kind of decision making checks embedded into the whole life cycle. And of course, bringing in the AI agent capability with your human tester, making them very comfortable with each other so that they can work as intended.
Thank you so much, Lisha. I think what it means is like a co-led partnership, right? I mean, a
Absolutely.
co-partnership, I would say. Yeah. That is a great, ending point. I think that really good that we kept it towards the end. It also leaves a lot of hope for the audience, of course, I'm pretty sure, on where the industry is evolved and what they can basically take away, as a next step. So yeah, that brings us to the end of another insightful session of TestMu AI XP webinar series. Thank you so much, Lisha, for such a thoughtful, candid, conversation that you shared today. I mean, we had today, and I'm pretty sure that the perspective on how AI impact on insurance, testing, model risk, explainability, and even how where the future of all of it lies has definitely given our audience so much to reflect upon, and they can absolutely apply it in their own space of work. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to, of course, follow TestMu AI on our social media channels, and we'll also be tagging Lisha in the post. So go ahead and give her a follow so that you can see what is the incredible work that she is doing too. Lisha, any parting thoughts, anything that you'd like to share towards the end?
I love the interaction, Kavya, and thank you for the opportunity for me to bring in my thoughts into it. I think it's a very important segment. Insurance is one of the highest growing industries, right? So being able to understand how AI is influencing insurance testing is extremely important. And just a message for my testing community. Everybody keeps on asking whether testing is still relevant. Yes, absolutely. It is becoming even more relevant in the current context. When everything else can be replaced, I don't think testing can be. So that's my parting thought for the audience. And thank you so much, Kava. You were incredible.
Thank you, Lisha. Same thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. It has been a super insightful conversation. And yeah, thank you to our audience once again. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.